Does leadership still matter in a world run by AI? Or are we just pretending CEOs make a difference while data and algorithms drive all the real decisions? Welcome to Do Not Flush, the podcast where we talk about the business topics no one wants to touch but should. The world isn't black and white, and leadership is no exception. Too often, we either glorify the CEO as the genius behind every success or blame them for every failure. But what actually makes a great leader, and in a world increasingly run by AI, does leadership even matter anymore? Today, we're sitting down with Bill Bennett, a guy who went from a stable career to stepping into a company in essentially survival mode, and then helped it grow by over 700% in over 2 years. How much of that was leadership, strategy, and sacrifice, and how much was just market forces, timing, and technology? More importantly, will leadership still have a place in a future dominated by AI? That's what we're going to get into today on Do Not Flush Leadership. Bill, pleasure having you today. Please tell us more about yourself and what Innovative Food Holdings does.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Yeah, so you sort of alluded to it in the intro, but I took a pretty big career move about 2 years ago when I joined Innovative Food Holdings, which is the company I'm now CEO of. So I spent almost 20 years in kind of big corporate America. Started my career with General Mills and then SC Johnson. Did business school at Duke, and then moved into Walmart and then Kroger. So my most recent role was at Kroger, where I led the $10 billion e-commerce business there. So really big role that I really enjoyed, almost 3 years in that leadership role. And I just sort of felt like I was excited and prepared to own something myself, and sort of eat what we cook is actually one of our values that we've established here at our company. Like, you take full accountability for my decisions and my outcomes, and that's hard to do at a big company where there are lots of cooks in the kitchen and a variety of voices that you have to sort of balance and manage. So I started looking. Took me many months while I was still working at Kroger to sort of find the right fit. And it's funny, when I got the first phone call about this role, I did some initial research on the company, and it just wasn't a healthy company. I almost shut it down immediately just because it wasn't something that felt like it had the risk profile that I was looking for. It felt too risky. And I can give some more history on that. But eventually what I ended up coming to the realization of was that there was a very profitable, good core to the company that I could, it was being shielded by losses in additional businesses that have been built or purchased over time. And I felt like there was a pretty clear strategy to be able to shed those unprofitable businesses and refocus the company on the profitable core, and then work to grow that instead of focusing on these other kind of side projects. So that's essentially what we've done over the 2 years I've been here, and it's been a really nice ride. Yeah, I mean, I always say the stock price is not the only measure of our success, because investors can be fickle and stock prices move up and move down sometimes regardless of financial results. But like you said, it's definitely been nice to see the stock price move. It was at 25 cents the day that
Oh, wow.
the day before my announcement came out that I was joining the company, and we're sitting up around $2 now. So it's been a nice ride, but I think we've got our best days ahead of us, and we've really kind of just finished cleaning up the company, and we're now moving into growth mode, which has been a pretty exciting transition. So anyway, that's a bit of an overview, and hopefully that answers your question.
It does, sure does, Bill. And congratulations on the new the role and the recent success. And hope it is of many to come.
Thanks.
I'm curious now. So, are you a good cook? What do you? To put you on the spot here.
um, yeah, I mean, certainly no classical training for my chefing skills, but it's something I've always enjoyed. I actually, when I was a kid, when I was 19, I went and served a mission for my church in Italy, and lived there for 2 years. And so, you can't help but pick up a passion for food and cooking when you're in an environment like that. I actually used to, when we would have dinner with somebody, I'd ask if we could come over an hour early, and I could learn how they were making whatever they're
The
making. And then I'd make a little recipe card for each of those visits and actually like jot down notes. And so I've got this like homemade recipe book now of all these like little Italian grandmas that taught me how to make gnocchi from scratch and stuff like that. So I kind of picked up a passion for food during that time. And most of my career has been in food tangentially, but this has been especially fun because we focus on specialty food, which is all, gourmet, higher end, kind of interesting things that aren't available through typical channels. And that makes it a really fun place to work.
I definitely can relate to that, and that is sound does definitely sound like a dream. I don't know what happened. So I've always, I've enjoyed the cooking here and there, but about 2 years ago, something clicked on me, and I have cooked everything. I mean, I've made everything from sushi to smoked brisket to, I mean, you name it, I've made it. And it's even like shocked some of my family members how to the great lengths I've gone to. And it's I kind of always quote Sherlock Holmes's attic theory. Kind of my attic was kind of a little bit empty, so I could have some space to do some stuff. And because of it, like now the family eats better. The kids are more into more they're past the chicken nuggets phase, so that's a very good thing.
That's amazing.
And it definitely helped me understand the value of ingredients,
Hmm.
and how hard it is to find the right ingredients. And sometimes I actually found myself using having gotten used to, like, kind of, let's call it this mass, the what you usually get at a grocery store might not be the best. So I find myself applying a lot of techniques on food that is meant to makes maybe let's call it a piece of food of maybe of lesser quality taste better, but then I mistakenly made the same use the same techniques on when I found a good piece of ingredient, let's call it, whether it was a steak or what have you. And I had the folks that would try my food would say, you kind of ruined it. It tastes good, but you ruined it. I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, we're looking forward to, like, let's call it the wagyu beef or this or that it would have this certain taste to the actual ingredient. And I just got used to working with, let's call it subpar ingredients, not because of my fault, but because it's what I usually find. That I found that I've sometimes need to stop and think, if I'm working with quality, I need to make sure that I only enhance the presentation or the maybe give it a little a theme to the ingredient versus kind of covering the actual flavor of the main ingredient. So that's something that I found myself having to keep in mind when working with higher quality foods. So I definitely appreciate where you guys are coming from, because I can tell you I've tried to make um, pasta alla, what was it? The one that it's a Roman dish, and I had to find some pork jowl, and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Hmm.
Cured pork jowl, and I had to go to an Italian grocery store to finally find it. So that's a interesting thing to um, I think there's definitely a market for it for folks that want to have elevate their dishes. So do you think the future of food is the of e-commerce? Is it heading more towards boutique brands, or are we going to have more corporate consolidation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way cuisine trends are moving is that consumers are just continuing to get more and more exploratory with the types of foods that they're interested in not only eating but trying to make themselves. And so I definitely think that um the big corporate giants have seen this too. And you saw, just recently the acquisition of Poppy soda, right? Like that, I think is such a testament that we're not always going to be drinking, basic colas for the rest of our lives. That there's all unique types of foods continue to have a big draw, and the big companies see that, and they've been making acquisitions for a long time now to make sure they're staying abreast of that, right? Was at General Mills for many years. During my time there, the company was mostly focused on its classics, the, Cinnamon Toast Crunch and Progresso Soup and all those. And it's been a long time since I left there, but over those years, they have really refocused on acquiring lots of small, kitschy brands that better meet those bigger trends on taste and cuisine variety and everything else. So yeah, definitely think specialty foods are a trend that isn't going away anytime soon. And I think a good reason that's I'm excited about the future of our company because I think we're focused in the right place.
So that's fun. A good point you bring up, and I'm curious, why isn't like the with the for I think to the Pepsi acquisition or plant acquisition, why? I mean, they probably have the capacity and the skill set to manufacture their own sub brand. Let's call it. Why would they go to the trouble of acquiring a another company that operates in this niche? And also, what wouldn't like as a consumer, I fear that if they acquire, they're just gonna put it under the same let's call it formula that
Mhm.
the bigger brands have, and then I'm just gonna be getting the same. They're just gonna turn to what the probi I think they claim it has probiotic or prebiotic benefits. Is that some of that stuff is gonna go away? Maybe they switch ingredients, gonna have it more appeal to the economies of scale they're looking or they're used to. Curious, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think if you look back at the history of CPGs creating new successful brands, they are um, woefully inadequate at doing it successfully. They've typically operated as portfolio holding companies of brands that have been created by others, and it's pretty rare that the big CPGs come out with a new brand that they're able to build from scratch. Even despite their deep pockets and, extensive R&D budgets and everything else, it's like I think most food brands, it's more than just R&D and brand building. There's a lot of like sort of spirit that goes into brand creation that a lot of times the big CPGs miss, and so it's why they spend a lot of time on M&A and managing their portfolio. And they just sort of realize they're not always going to be perfect at creating new brands. But yeah, your concern is valid on like, will they ruin the Poppy brand?
Yeah.
I think there are lots of examples that go kind of both directions on that statement. I look at Ben and Jerry's as one that I think any passionate follower of Ben and Jerry's would say had been largely ruined by who was, I think, Unilever that bought them whatever, a decade or 15 years ago, and they kind of lost their spirit behind it, their sourcing strategies and everything else that were part of like, building a better world, all sort of went by the wayside as they were owned by a bigger conglomerate. So, but I think CPGs realize that too. So if I were, if we could be a fly on the wall of the boardroom of Pepsi, I'm sure they're thinking carefully about how to not ruin the brand and let it kind of continue to live its life, but benefit from the sales team and the marketing dollars and everything else that should be able to bring to the table.
So your company stock skyrocketed over 700% in 2 years. Was this what would you say is the secret behind that kind of success, and how much of it was solid leadership and human instinct versus kind of let's call it maybe AI powered decision making?
Yeah. I mean, I might be a little bit biased to answer this question, but I think what we've done so far has largely been sort of strategic in nature and not something that AI has really powered. But I think our next chapter is going to be very much AI powered. So just to give a little bit of history, um, the company was founded almost 25 years ago on on this idea that it was founded by a chef who had been running a restaurant consulting business for many years, and people always asked him for his Rolodex of vendors that he would use when he would set up a new restaurant. And so he had this idea that we could really monetize this idea of finding good vendors for solid ingredients. And so the whole concept initially was let's get his network of vendors available for purchase by anybody in the country, right? Excuse me. And so um, very early on, he struck up a partnership with U.S. Foods, who's one of the largest food distributors in the country. And of course, I think of them as like a Cisco or Performance Food Service Group, sort of like the Walmart of food service, right? They carry all the basic stuff, great prices, strong service, but they're never going to carry the unique stuff that doesn't turn as fast because it's just not their customer. It's not their forte. They're good at negotiating low prices and pushing high volumes. So they could never justify in their, a space in their warehouse for the items that we would focus on. So we've tried to always have something complementary to what U.S. Foods and Cisco might carry, and that's why that relationship was so valuable to U.S. Foods early on, because we essentially operated like a marketplace, tagged on to their core business, and we brought sort of that long tail of assortment that they wouldn't otherwise be able to sell to their customers. And frankly, they'd lost market share to specialty distributors through over the years. So that was sort of the genesis of it. Like I said, over the years, my predecessor bought several direct-to-consumer e-commerce companies that really just were bad purchases and nearly sunk the company. So one called the Fresh Diet he bought back in 2014, a little bit like Factor Meals today, but they actually owned their own fleet of trucks and would deliver meals 3 times a day to customers. So you can imagine what that operating model looked like. Um, he resold it for pennies on the dollar 18 months later. So it didn't work at all. And then in 2018, he bought a company called igourmet.com. And then in 2019, mouth.com, which were both consumer kind of gourmet foods companies. And by the time I got here in 2023, we had lost $12 million on those 2 acquisitions over 5 years. And for a company our size, we're at a market cap of 100 million now. Back then, it was a market cap of 12 million. So to lose $12 million over 5 years for a 12 million market cap company is a horrible failure. And so in our first 6 months, we sort of did a full strategy deep dive of those 2 acquisitions and came to the conclusion that it would probably take another 5 years and another 12 million of investment to get them to profitability and the correct scale to be worth holding. And yet we had this profitable core that I mentioned earlier, the food service business that its profits had been shielded by all the losses on the direct to consumer businesses. And so we really just needed to sort of unburden the company. So we sold off and closed down a number of different entities that were under some sort of these examples that I've shared, and narrowed the company down to the pieces that we thought we could grow profitably. So I think those are, we actually are very passionate about using AI in everything we do, but they're not, that strategy creation I think is probably pretty tough to apply an AI model to. But along the way, we've used AI to write our press releases, to write our earnings calls. It attends all of our Teams meetings through Microsoft Copilot. We connect that into Asana to track all of our to-dos and follow-ups, and we have a lot of like background processes that are driven by AI, and that leads me now to our next chapter, which is as we're now starting to lean into growth in this food service business. um, like I said earlier, we're basically a marketplace. And so our biggest growth lever is growth of the catalog of the assortment that we carry. And that process is painfully manual today. We just a little kind of peek under the hood of what we do. We have this gigantic spreadsheet that we ask a new vendor to fill out to give us all the data we need on the catalog that we're bringing in. But most of the vendors we work with are tiny little mom and pop shops who are more focused on pulling the fish in from their boat, not focused on filling out spreadsheets, right? So we have a huge fallout rate of new vendors that come in. We send them the spreadsheet and they say, to heck with it, right? I'm not doing that. It's not worth it.
Yeah,
And so what we're working on live right now is applying AI to that whole process so that we can make it as simple and easy as we can on the vendor. And our goal is that right now it takes 6 to 12 months for us to set up a new vendor, which is just
wow.
ridiculous. Yeah. We set up 700 new items last year, and at the same time we lost 1,000 items. So our catalog actually decreased last year, which is obviously the opposite of what we need to be doing. So um, our goal is to take that kind of cycle time of setting up a new vendor from 6+ months down to 2 weeks. And if we can get to that kind of a pace and setting up, thousands of items a year, then we will be on a much bigger growth curve than we are today, and I think incredibly disruptive. So, what we're thinking about with the AI is um, a vendor should be able to upload whatever they have, a PDF of their catalog, an Excel of their catalog, a scrapped sheet of paper that they've got something written on, and the AI should be able to pull all the information out of it that we need to categorize it into our internal templates, and then kick off and assign all the like next steps that occur internally to get something fully set up. I mean, you wouldn't believe the quantity of email that we manage to hey, I just finished this step. Now you take on this next one. And then, every step in the process has bottlenecks and handoffs where, things are lost and manual mistakes are made. And it's just crazy, right? Like those are things that you feel like that's how it would have operated in the 90s. And now we're, 30 years later and still doing it the same way. And so, we're probably a month or two away now from having all these processes in place with an AI driven platform. And I think it's going to be hugely differentiating for us to be able to move at a completely different pace. So our next chapter is going to be much more AI driven than I think our first chapter was.
You're reminding me of the acute theory class days, of where you'd have bottlenecks and
Yeah,
had to.
absolutely. I use that stuff all the time.
Yeah, good stuff. This is great. So you're taking unstructured data, you're feeding it into this AI. Let's call it the black box, and then your vendors would essentially use natural language, plain English, to say, Here's what I have," and it will automatically take everything, take all the documents, and populate it into your inputs for next steps and move forward.
Yep.
Very nice. I think that's a great practical way of using AI, and I think like, I always, I've had clients come and say, "Well, we're not seeing the ROI in AI," and you ask and you try to dig in and see what they're doing, and they're going for the moonshot from day one.
Yeah.
They're trying to, basically, yeah, let's just cut costs by 90% by you having AI do everything. Well, that's not how it works. You have to find kind of bits and pieces. You have to work with the team, the culture, the dynamics, the processes you have in place, and bit by bit, and move forward. That's brilliant. So
Let me add something to what you just said. I mean, I think
yeah,
the shoot for the moon approach, I think we can all see the vision of like where AI is headed, but it's not there yet, right? And so I think it's easier to start with the low hanging fruit and start to like learn and feel out what this process looks like, to automate, to streamline. And we've been really clear with the team in terms of like getting buy-in from everybody that this is not about eliminating jobs or labor, right? We want to accelerate our work, and so the people who were doing this manual work before, their jobs are going to change. They're going to start to be more focused on sort of, you know, gut checking the output from the AI and helping us refine it and evolve it because it's never going to be perfect. Um, and that's very different than the data entry work that they used to do before. But I think that's also like an important part of getting the team excited about the evolution. Like we've spent a ton of time diving into the importance of catalog growth and helping the team see that that's the number one thing we need to do to be able to grow the company. And so we can't just add people forever, right? We won't scale that way, and we just incur more and more costs. And frankly, because the way the process is built today, it's all in people's heads, right? It's like I know that I have to put a comma between these two fields, or it gets kicked out of the U.S. food system when I try to upload the items. And to try to train, if we brought on 5 or 10 more people to just accelerate the whole process, to train everybody to do it consistently based on stuff that's in somebody's head, like you're never gonna do that successfully. It's just gonna bog everything down and go slower. So I think it's an interesting thought process that you can't just chase that final outcome. There's a lot of like culture management and evolution. There's a lot of like, winning the hearts and minds of people and not just, throwing in your technology and moving forward. And back to your very original question, I think that's where the leadership comes in, right? Um, it, Throwing in the AI is an important technical step, a strategic step, but being able to get people on board and motivated and excited about where you're taking the company is a whole different game.
Agreed. Yeah, it is at the end of the day a tool, a very advanced tool, and it needs to be used in the right way. So let me ask you this: you've kind of alluded to it earlier on about coming in and taking on a. You took the risk of jumping on to a company that was in survival mode. You tell us a bit more about personally how did that affect you? What kind of sacrifice did you have to go through, and what would you say is the some of the mind shifts that you had to undertake in order to be able to um, push through? You know what I mean? Just curious as to what you think there.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I've had a pretty risk averse career until this move. I've always been with big companies and, tried to join companies and teams that I felt like had, a solid future to them. Um, and I'd had several opportunities to either start a company or join like an early stage startup along the way and just kind of always shied away from it. I'm the sole breadwinner for our family, and so there's a lot of risk like tied to that single income for a family. We have three kiddos that rely on that, right? Plus my spouse. So, um, I think when I got to this opportunity, I looked at it and felt like I had like enough of a network back within my old world that if something really didn't go well, I could lean back into kind of other career prospects. But it was definitely scary. And I think in hindsight, I'm still sort of surprised I took the risk I took because, it's worked out well so far. We're obviously not at the end of the road at all, but it could have easily gone the other direction. I think by this point in the trajectory, and I'm super grateful it hasn't. But it's I leaned into several different kind of support systems, I would say. So definitely, the board is awesome. I've got a fantastic board surrounding me who have great capital markets experience and operating experience, and they have it's funny until you're the CEO of a company, you never really see that interaction between CEO and board, and so all you know is from what you see in the movies or read about and things, right? And they're all very dramatized. And I've been just so impressed that they have sort of maintained this balance between offering support, the accountability that a public company board definitely needs to, provide to the CEO, but without sort of like getting in my way and dictating every single decision we make either, right? Like it's a very balanced relationship with the board that I've appreciated extensively. We have good, hard conversations. We push each other on, big decisions we're making, but at the end of the day, it's the relationship is there, and we work together to build the company, and that's been a really fun process. I think they're all people I'll be friends with for forever, and because of the respect that we've all built for each other. So that's been a key part of like managing that risk. Um, I've been super blessed to be able to bring on some close friends as part of the management team. So my COO, Brady Smallwood, is somebody I've worked with for over a decade now. We first met on the finance team back at Walmart right out of business school, and then he came to work for me on a different team at Walmart. He went a different way, and I went a different way for a bit. I tried to recruit him to the Walmart e-commerce team, and that didn't work out. He tried to recruit me to a team he was working on at a different company, and that didn't work out. And then when I got to Kroger, he agreed to come work with me there, and we worked there 3 years together. And now we've been here at IVFH for 2 years. So a lot of history there, and that having somebody that you can just completely trust as your right hand man has been hugely valuable to me. So tons of gratitude to him. And then um, And then we were able to bring on our CFO that we'd met back in our Walmart days on the finance team there as well. So Gary Schubert, it has just been an awesome addition to the team. And you know, I haven't worked with him as much in the last 10 years as I have with Brady, but I knew him from those early days at Walmart and had huge respect for his intellect and his drive and his strategic thinking. And he's been a huge plus to the team as well. So, you know, it's not at all just me. It's a whole team effort. The company itself, too, the entire employee base, um, have just been awesome about managing through the change. I think everybody knew that the company needed to change, and there was a hunger for it. And so, you know, I've spent a lot of time communicating to the team that there was a huge lack of communication before I got here. I actually, this is a funny story. My first week on the job, I asked my predecessor, "Hey, who's the leadership team? Right? Like, give me the names of all the people who are the main leaders that I need to pull together. I'd like to do a weekly team meeting." And he said, "You know, I don't know. I don't really have a leadership team." And the more I got to know like the structure, I realized it was being run in a very disparate, separated, siloed way across the company. And so I literally had to go through and just pick who my leadership team would be. I invited them to the first team meeting the following Monday, and we literally had to start with introductions. They hadn't met each other before. And
Oh,
and
wow.
so yeah, I mean we're a small company, but even like the small little verticals we had, they hadn't been working together at all. And so, you know, we started this kind of rallying cry from day one that we called One IVFH. And we tried to just break down all those walls and get people working together and sharing ideas and sharing support. The company never had a formal incentive program in place. And so we took the whole leadership team. And, you know, I think if you look at I've worked on a lot of, you know, different incentive programs over the years. A lot of companies will set incentive programs based on individual metrics. And I felt strongly from day one that if I did that, it would pull people apart, right? They'd be so focused on their specific metric they were working towards that they wouldn't support the company strategy. And so for our first 2 years, we set our incentive program to just be focused on total company metrics. And that got people to just stop worrying so much about like, you know, protecting their space and you know, owning their turf kind of thing like that. We didn't want that kind of mentality. And so we created this one IDFH culture. We created something we called one IDFH University. And now once a month we do a total company town hall. We take one of our 10 values and we go deep on it together as a company. And then we assign some homework because it's a university. So I give a couple reading assignments and usually a TED talk or two to watch. And for 30 minutes of homework, then they have to go on our Teams chat for the company and put in a paragraph or two of what they learned. And that's kind of we do that each month and are using it to kind of up level the cultural thinking in a company and how we work together. So anyway, lots of work across all those different aspects that I use to sort of manage my own risk, right? Like I feel like by being in the leadership chair now, it was really on me to figure out ways to succeed and to bring along the company with me. You know, surround myself with strong leaders and a great board, and I think that's been how we've managed through some of that risk.
That's beautiful, Bill. I appreciate all that insight that you just provided, and yeah, it reminds me of several things you've talked about the university aspect. And I forgot the name of. I feel bad. I forgot the name of the professor and the course, but I do recall a course. So we took on the whole incentive, the incentives in the company, and how it's important to go look past the first queue and or the second queue and kind of go think more long term, think more culture, and
Mhm.
it's fascinating to see an actual use case based on those kind of concepts that we learned. That's really terrific and great to see. And I also like that you know you definitely gave credit to the board and the rest of the team. I definitely agree with you. It takes a team. It's rarely one person. Which kind of brings me to my next quick question here. You know, we always hear about the kind of the visionary CEO, and is that would you say that is that like kind of then is a myth based on what you said, or is it just best leaders kind of are the ones that make the right calls at the right time, or is or is this whole what's your take on the visionary CEO? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends a lot on industry and business model, right? Like I don't pretend to be like a tech startup CEO who's going to change the world, right? Like I would love to be that. That's probably not me. This is a company in a very old school industry that I think we've got something incremental and differentiated um, that is unique enough to grow a really compelling business around. But that's different than we're inventing the future and things like that. So I think you probably need a that visionary CEO for those types of roles, for those types of companies. This is a boring old industry, and I think a lot of times the most fun um, sort of growth opportunities are in these boring old industries that have been doing things the same way for a long time. And so that to me is what's fun here, is that we're able to take a business model that doesn't really exist today and insert it into an industry that has been doing things the same way for a long time. I mean, the I mentioned US Foods and Cisco earlier, that the whole business model is built on volume, right? So they have to pick items that are going to sell fast. They have to, um, work within a constrained environment with the size of their given warehouse. And then they need their trucks to be full when they head out. And so they give order minimums to restaurants, and it varies by business, but a lot of them are like 750 or $1,000. So I mean that's a lot for a restaurant to pay to get a single delivery, but they just literally won't. They can't get a delivery without spending that much. So they have high order minimums. They over the years have really reduced their level of kind of sales support and everything, and really just pushed everybody to their websites. So it's a pretty kind of cold experience, and it certainly doesn't give access to a full catalog of items that a restaurant would need to be able to operate, because they're limited to focusing on those high turn items, right? So it's like the whole industry, because of its like logistical constraints, has resulted in a limited catalog and these high order minimums and low service levels. And so I think we break all three of those in a way that um, offers something totally unique, right? Much more extensive and unique catalog. We ship by FedEx exclusively. We spend a ton of money with FedEx every year, because it's all based on getting product from the point of origin. Like literally, we ship from a fisherman in Alaska straight to a restaurant's door, right? We cut out all that middle distribution by shipping with FedEx, and that's a totally different thought process. It's not, it's not typical to receive fresh fish by FedEx at a restaurant store, and a lot of them need to experience it the first time, and you get it, and it's cold, and it's perfectly packaged, and the fish has been protected with care along the way, and the first time you receive it, you think this is game changing. I can't get anything close to this from Cisco and US Foods, and
yeah,
and you build loyalty in a way that you could never get to without something that unique, right?
and you bring up a good point, and actually, I apologize I didn't look into it, but do you guys provide a list of the restaurants you work with? Because quite honestly, and I've maybe in the last give you some insight, last 2 years, I probably went to a restaurant maybe 3 or 4 times. I rarely eat out because to me it's just basically the same, like you mentioned, Cisco foods, same foods that basically overly killed with butter and what have you. And just to me, there's no differentiation. To me, I'm paying the same, for the same foods. And I want something unique, especially when you see all the food shows on Netflix and this and that. When you're like,
Yeah.
man, like I want to try some of that food. That looks amazing. And then you learn that's what kind of helped me kind of pushed me to cook myself. But do you have a list of those restaurants? Because if there's something local, I'm gonna go try them out.
I'd be happy to provide it to you offline. Typically, I think about like our customers really US Foods and Cisco, because that's who we're technically selling to. The restaurants are their customers, right? So we have to be very
Ah,
cautious on like not like overly marketing to those customers because it's
I
really
got you.
their relationship. Our relationship is with them. But it, where I'll go from here is there. We talk a lot about focusing on the end customer though. Like we have to understand the chef mentality if we're gonna, select the right assortment to carry for them. And so when I first started, we did a bunch of primary research. It was really interesting. We spent 2 whole days in a market talking to restaurant owners, chefs, um, salespeople of the big guys of the US Foods and Cisco, and like just trying to fully understand the whole industry. Because I hadn't been in this space, right? I've been in retail forever, which is, somewhat connected, but it's a different world here in food service. Um, and so we used that like sort of primary research we did to inform our target customer. And the way we talk about the chef that we're looking for is a choosy chef. And this is a chef who like is not content with doing anything normal, right? They're not somebody who's going to make a burger with bacon on it, right? Like they're going to take that burger and they're going to come up with their own, pickled jalapeno jam that they're going to put on it, right? And then they're going to take that bacon and they're going to candy it in, maple syrup imported from Canada, and like every dish they're going to put their spin on it. Their menu is seasonal and rotating, and, once their menu is set, they're already thinking about the next menu because they can't sit still, and they're never content with what they've got currently on the menu. They've got cool specials coming in all the time. Like that's the kind of chef that we're looking for. And and so we end up focusing on like a lot of white tablecloth restaurants, a lot of independent restaurants, not chains. And those are the ones who are going to appreciate the stuff that we bring on. um, I mentioned the Alaskan fisherman a second ago. I actually, everything we sell is in large quantities, so I can't order a lot of it myself because I just have a garage full of freezers. But I did just order some Alaskan black cod from
Ooh.
this guy in Alaska, and I'd never had the fish before. Supposedly, it's like the new Chilean sea bass because it's far more sustainable. Sea bass takes 15 years to mature and be able to reproduce, whereas this Alaskan black cod can do so in a year. So it's a more sustainable fish. But it's similar. It's a white, very delicate, flaky um, fish that can like kind of take on flavor of whatever you add to it. And it's the new big thing. Like all the big restaurants in New York are serving it. And so anyway, I ordered it. It was fantastic. Arrived overnight from Alaska, in a super well packaged, carefully protected along the journey. And because we're cutting out all that middle distribution, um, nobody else is marking it up. It's just the fishermen marking it up to us, and then we're marking it up to the customer. And
I'm I'm
so it's kind of
I'm
a cool
sold.
business model.
I'm sold. I'm gonna start ordering. I don't know if you guys do B2C, but I'm definitely gonna start ordering some stuff. This sounds
Yeah,
great, and it's
I'll
definitely something.
I'll give you the address of our website. We're sort of testing out right now. It's called Harvest Chef's Market. You can put it in your notes for the podcast, but it's something we're sort of toying around with right now to give consumers access as well. And it all comes in big quantities though, so you got to be ready for
I
it.
mean, I love that too. I'm gonna give you some insights. I'm into honey as well. I mean, I've ordered honey from a special honey. Like, get this, from Tasmania, where you'd have to fly to mainland Australia, then take a small plane to or a plane or boat to Tasmania, and then take another special plane to the mountains of Tasmania to get the special honey that is, and it's like, Gordon Ramsay used it in in some of his dishes, and kinda tastes it tastes like nothing I've ever had before, and a small
Mm,
jar is like $20, and it's
cool.
incredible. It's like nothing you've ever had before, so you put it, and then also find out about a different type of honey. Believe it or not, it's bitter honey from
Mm,
Italy, where it was in the day used to coat lamb, and then when you cook it, it would uh there's like a chemical process, chemical reaction that takes place and helps uh, tenderize the meat and whatnot. But I love those ingredients. Bill, I know we're almost out of time. Just one last question here for you before we call it a day. What would you say One piece of the advice you'd give to the next generation of CEOs, keeping in mind where there's a lot of unknowns around AI, what would you say are some of the lessons you think would translate to the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've highlighted a few of these, so I'll maybe summarize them here. But I think that first step of like, not trying to shoot for the moon initially. Um, I think people who are, laying off whole teams of their current employees and putting chatbots in place are missing the boat on the impact it's going to have on their customers, because most of the technology is not there yet, right? So I think using AI as like a support structure for current employees is a much more cautious but successful way to approach it. And then the other thing I'd say is that just the importance of the culture management and evolution that needs to go along with the AI. Um, we've I mentioned the IVFH University. We did a whole segment on what we called the innovation mindset of, I'm just because I kept hearing from people, oh, we've been doing it this way for 15 years. And I'm like, that's to me, I hear that and I think you're doing it wrong. I don't even know what you're doing, but you're doing it wrong if you've been doing it the same way for 15 years. Like all technology has been progressing so quickly that you can never sit still. Right. And so really trying to integrate into your company culture the mentality that we never sit still on any process, any um, business model, any strategy. It just always all of it has to constantly be evolving. And I actually shared this TED talk with the team during this segment of the IVFH University. It was and I can give you this link too if you're interested, but it was an Indian entrepreneur who his whole point was you actually don't need really high technology to be able to innovate. And he shared all these examples from India where they're taking like flip phones and using texting capability with flip phones to be able to implement much higher end e-commerce technology through texting that, like, in the US we would like turn up our noses up, like, why would you do that, right? But if nobody has smartphones or they're just, prohibitively too expensive, then it forces you to innovate and think about different approaches. So I use that to talk to the team about, like, you don't personally need to understand AI. Like we'll work on that centrally with our technology team and everything. What I need is your mindset to be such that you're looking at your current workload and saying there's got to be a better way, right? And thinking about how do I bring in Asana automations, or how do I bring in Google Forms into what I'm doing. It's stuff that's simple, that's been around for a long time, but it's the mindset has to shift. And so, I guess that'd be my other piece of advice is think carefully about the culture evolution in tandem with the technology evolution, because at the end of the day, you're going to need employees to be the ones deploying this and accepting it and driving it forward for you.
Bill, beautiful message. I appreciate every second you spent with us today. Thank you, and I look forward to hopefully this is one of many conversations to come. Thank you.
That's good. Thanks, Michael. See ya.